Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia video. And today, I want to talk about the latest chapter of My Hero Academia. So, spoilers ahead if you're not up to date. Be warned, I'm about to unleash the spoils. Okay, still here? Excellent. So yeah, a couple of chapters ago, Bakugo had his second major heroic sacrifice moment, where he pushed himself to his limit in order to try and buy some time for his allies in their fight against Shigaraki for one. Of course, since he'd been storing so much sweat in his hands, his glands or his paws or whatever, they basically couldn't excrete all the nitroglycerin that he was building up, and so it started oozing out of his body. And probably inside his body too. And this made him a whole lot more powerful, but at the cost of turning him into a glass cannon. And thus, he actually manages to strike some fear into Shigaraki for a moment, before he promptly pushes his body too far and turns himself into a corpse with a massive hole in his chest, and a ruined set of important organs. Namely, his lungs and his heart. So a big question coming out of that chapter was this: is he actually legitimately dead? Is he gone? Is he going to be resurrected somehow? Or through the power of plot, is he managing to cling on to life and thus find himself healed by the power of plot? And honestly, I think it was clear to most that he was never going to completely get written out of the story as a corpse. It didn't feel like it fit in all that well with the story being told. And so, when the next chapter came out, it was pretty clear what was going to happen. He was going to get brought back to life. We had Shigaraki taunting the heroes about Bakugo's death, we had sad reactions from various different characters, and the confirmation that yes, he was dead at this point, there's no pulse, and his body was pretty much ruined at that point in time. And whilst this is going on, Mirko's losing limbs left and right, Darby's roasting one of the flaming sidekicks and is powering up immensely to battle his little brother, whilst the original All For One is getting ready to keep fighting as he's been reversed back into his prime form, and is confirmed to be dying because of this. Eventually, he's going to be phasing out of existence as he keeps getting rewound further and further back. But before that happens, he intends to do everything he can do to destroy the hope for the world's future. To do everything he can do to ensure that Shigaraki wins in the end and defeats the heroes. And I guess he's going to do so by killing as many prominent heroes as he can to lighten the load for his successor. And on top of that, there's also a stupid side story where the US government is essentially giving up in the face of the overwhelming power of Shigaraki. And it's like, I didn't really need to see this, or really want to see this at all. A waste of time and panels if you ask me, and in a world where almost everybody has superpowers, for some reason I find the idea of the US government giving up and rolling over like cowards to be the most unbelievable thing in the entire history of the show, the franchise, the manga, anything. This doesn't make sense. A government famous for its military interventions when it gets upset, just sitting back and thinking, oh gosh, what are we gonna do? He seems so strong and scary. Character assassination, I tells ya. Anyway, Edshot just comes out of nowhere to find Bakugo's corpse being tended to by Best Jeanist, and then he reveals that he has a super move that can bring Bakugo back to life. He can enter into his body using his quirk and basically put him back together and form up parts of his organs that have been lost. But of course, this is going to come at the cost of his own life. So after telling his allies to sacrifice themselves to buy time, he begins. And that's where the last couple of chapters lead off. Of course, before the release of the most recent chapter, chapter 365. And so, let's go through the events of that one now, shall we? So we start off the chapter once again with Edshot, who's in the midst of stretching and thinning out his body using his quirk to make himself as thin as spider thread and strong enough to tighten around the wounds to stop the bleeding. And luckily enough, Wash gave him a bubble earlier to sterilize him just in case something like this would happen. And so now, Bakugo's not going to get any nasty infections from our resident ninja hero. After all, who knows where he's been? Edshot notices that Best Jeanist was able to close up some of the wounds, but he couldn't stop the bleeding, nor fix the actual damage to the heart and lungs. But luckily enough, Edshot will be able to do just that. Fix up Bakugo's body so that he can continue to live and function. Just better hope his brain hasn't been too deprived of oxygen, otherwise this is a bit of a waste of time. Anyway, he sends Jeanist and Mirko off to keep fighting, whilst he brings Bakugo back to consciousness so they can show Shigaraki that he can't win, that they're still fighting, they won't give up. But of course, all of this is coming at the cost of Edshot's life force. He's slowly but surely slipping away, which is sad, yes, but Eri does still have her quirk, right? She managed to bring back that Yakuza goon that Overhaul had turned into a meat suit. So if she can do that, can't she bring back Edshot whilst also healing Bakugo's wounds later on? Or are they just going to have them all be dead? Because really, her quirk is kind of busted. I think they could afford to do this. Anyway, moving on. Shigaraki notices they're still tending to Bakugo and gets a little bit frustrated at this, as in his eyes, that chapter's over and done with, he's dead, let him lie. And so he tries to attack, only for Mirko to go full psycho and attack him, losing another arm in the process and becoming rabid, completely entering a Berserker Rage mode fueled by adrenaline and pain. And honestly, she's gone through so much damage that at this point, I feel like actually killing her off wouldn't have any effect. So honestly, I think she's going to walk away from this. Well, maybe not walk, but hop on one leg anyway. New arms, another new leg, and she's going to be good to go. Seeing this one animated is going to be intense one day, I'll tell you what. Shigaraki then notices that some of these attacks are beginning to actually hurt him a little, which he speculates is tied to him actually being afraid for a moment back when Bakugo bum rushed him. And then all the remaining heroes in this specific confrontation start to attack him as one, buying as much time as possible for Deku to arrive and for the proper final battle to begin. And honestly, not really sure what to think about all this. There are of course moments that I feel are quite awesome. Mirko's whole deal is probably the highlight for me here. Just a full-on premium badass. And like, the moments themselves, and there are many of them, are quite epic. But I can't help but feel at this point in the story we're just spinning wheels waiting for Deku to show up. Since now we know that this is the final confrontation, the final battle. We know that only he is going to be able to finish this. And so whilst it's fun to watch, it does ultimately feel kind of drawn out, pointless. Because in the end, Deku does have chapter after chapter of battle that needs to be resolved, whilst these other characters are ultimately going to feel like a footnote in the story. Like in Dragon Ball, when you hit that fight that's obviously the finale, and so you know for a fact that only Goku and at a massive stretch Vegeta are actually going to be able to compete. And that's how I'm starting to feel. That even though Bakugo's not going to die, and the heroes are fighting tooth and nail to protect Edgeshot long enough to revive him, ultimately it doesn't matter. Deku's the one that matters most. Deku saves the day. And I don't see how Bakugo could possibly keep fighting after this. And I don't know, Deku's great, and I get that it's important to have him be the final confrontation against Shigaraki, but it also does add an element of futility. And I'm not really sure that really gels all that well with the themes of the story. And so I think I would have preferred to have Deku actually be here already, to be part of this battle. To see Bakugo push himself past his limit, sacrifice his life to help others. Same with Edgeshot. To see Mirko go all out and sacrifice her limbs. Him actually being there for that feels like it would have been more narratively satisfying. He'd be part of the fight, and thus he feels a sense of obligation to end things as quick as he can, but he can't, and thus more and more of his allies begin to pay the price, and so he starts to feel more and more alone. At least, that's what I think I would have preferred. But, as always, those are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the chapter? Like it? Hate it? Are there things you'd change? Do you like the direction the story's starting to go? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.